Welcome to the final day of the USTA's first ever Play into Competition Conference. I'm Jenna Kelly. We thank you for joining us for our third day of insight from experts and leaders in our sport. Our focus is through the lens of the USTA's American Development Model. The coaches you will hear from today know all about success on and off the court and at every level of play. Thank you for being here. Our first panelist is a recipient of the ITF's Philippe Chartrier Award for outstanding service to the game of tennis. Emilio Sanchez Vicario took his doubles partnership with Sergio Casal from winning Grand Slam championships to running their own world-renowned academy in multiple locations. You may have heard of his sister, 1994 U.S. Open champion Arantxa Sanchez Vicario. Strong family ties in tennis and the highest level of success on court. What better person to discuss performance pathways into competition than Emilio Sanchez Vicario?
It is an honor for me to be here today with you, Emilio. We have so many great questions for you, and I'm just looking forward to jumping right in. So the first one is, the Sanchez Vicario family has played an instrumental role in bringing Spanish tennis to the forefront of the worldwide game. Can you please tell us a little bit about your upbringing? What were the reasons that made you go from just playing tennis to then competing and then becoming a professional?
Well, initially my parents, they wanted us to be busy. And so my father was an engineer. He moved cities around. And every time he moved city, went to Pamplona. So they signed in this big club where they have a lot of sports. And my parents started to play tennis. And then when I was 5, they moved to Barcelona. And that's where they look for a similar club where they could play tennis, and we have other sports, swimming, soccer, and maybe tennis as well. And they found this club that it was going to have all these sports, but at the moment had only the tennis courts. So after a while, the guy disappeared, the president, with the money from the members, and then we had to play tennis. So we just went to play tennis on the tennis school and started to play there. We had a really good coach in the club that then went to the federation. But this coach printed on us this passion for the tennis and for the competition. And my parents love it, and they wanted us to be in sports. We were doing swimming and soccer at the school, but at the end, tennis, it had this essence of the competition that we started all to go towards that. And my older sister was super good, and then we went all of them after her, and then she finally went to Pepperdine in the college pathway, and I jumped at 18 to the pros. I was super fast. My brother was #1 in the world, and Arantxa was national champion at 13, so she was the #1 player in Spain. So then was everything so fast, and we were very, very, very lucky. So I suppose there was a part of the genes that was pretty well set to do this sport.
That's pretty obvious. I like how you mentioned the fact that all of you guys were multi-sport athletes. That's I think important. So as a player, you had success not only in singles, but also in doubles. How did each format of the game complement each other, and what are those key skills that you think contributed to your success?
Yeah, I think that when you start to play, you just are a single-minded person. But you know, in Spain, when we are very little, we play a lot of team play, so a lot of team sports, and you play like 5 singles and 2 doubles, or 6 singles and 3 doubles. So since very little already, you start to compete a lot in doubles. And when I was making the transition towards the pros, I remember that one way to improve your tennis was to be playing the doubles. And at the time, everyone was doing that, because when I arrived, so McEnroe and Fleming and everybody was playing doubles. And so my coach, he was very keen on me playing doubles, because he saw the the limitations that I had as a player. I didn't have such a good serve, and I had very little volley. So I had very good groundies, but I was having a lot of difficulties entering the court and arriving to volley. So when you are small and physically you need to grow, and you see the net so far, and in doubles, because the pathway to the net is smaller, and then it's like if you are not so much in trouble. When you go you're in junior, you go to the net, you have to cover all that big area. Is almost so difficult, and physically you don't change so much speeds, so it becomes a big challenge when you don't train it so much, no? So I think doubles was key. Was very difficult at the start for me, because I played with Sergio Casal, my partner, and we played in Davis Cup in my first year at 18, and we played okay. We won some matches, but our first match on the tour, my coach said, "No, you guys, we had the same coach, but she said, no, you guys cannot play." So we wait 1 year and a half until we play with other partners, until we try again in 85, and then we started to match up, and I started to use my serve much more, arriving to volleys and close better the game, and that helps me so much as well in my transition from clay court player to hard court player and to fast court player, which at the time, you remember that we had the average, so no one was investing so much on their game, because everybody were so much result oriented. So if you play a tournament in a surface that you didn't like, you go down a lot in the ranking. So I was very young in the top 15, top 20, but I stayed almost 5 months playing on hard court, not winning one match. So it was a big investment for 2 years losing, to be able then to stay in my career, play better, and at the end I almost had more chances to win the Open, the US Open, than to win a French Open. So the investment pay out, and that's what most of the players do today, that they just go in that transition much sooner, and they play better also hardcore earlier.
That's a phenomenal answer. So I want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. Doubles, in your opinion, was one of the keys to your success. And in looking at your stats, I can see in your rankings that you were doing really well in doubles. And then a few months later, that's when your ranking got much higher in singles. And then looking at your career titles, you have 15 career titles in singles and 50 career titles in doubles. So that's interesting, because we see a lack of doubles a lot among the juniors today. And maybe we can talk about that later, but I do have a lot of questions. So if you don't mind, we'll go on to number 3. What experiences or lessons did you learn from playing professional tennis that you could share for the benefit of both parents and coaches?
Well, it was a very long career. I played for almost 14 years professional. And it was for me, I was super lucky in some way, because I almost play only 2-3 qualies. So I went to a satellite, I won the Masters, I went to play at Challengers, I passed the quali and I arrived long. That gave me enough points to play in a quali from at the time Grand Prix. And then I just went to the semis, get a special exam, another semis, got another special exam. So in like 4 or 5 tournaments, my first year, I played the French Open, and then I won 3 rounds in the French Open. So I was 6th in the world. That was in one spring. So I was very lucky at the time. Also at the time I think that the level in the mid of the pyramid was not as high, because there was plenty of specialists. So, and that lowered the level in the other courts. Compared to today, the transition from junior to pros is much tougher, because everybody plays very well in all the surfaces, so that the specialists disappear. So and that limits the progression, so it takes a bit longer. That's why the players arrive 23, 24, 22, and it takes them a bit longer. But going back to the question, what I love about the tennis, and that's what I try to promote and try to teach, is that it forces you to be the best version of yourself every day, the days that you do very well and the days that you are not so well. And it teaches you to adapt and to be resilient, and it teaches you to be in some way, you have to be a loser to be a winner. And the people don't understand that. The people is perfectionists. They only want to win and results and do well. No. In tennis, you need to lose. And even the matches that you win and you play your best, you lose a lot. And I tell this statistic about the last 10 years, the number ones in the world, they win 55% of the points between the points they win and the ones and the mistakes of the others. So that means that the winners from the others and your mistakes, that means that 45% of the number ones in the world, they miss and they lose. So they are number ones on adapting to lose to be able to win that extra 5% of points to become who they become. No, so and if you relate that to life and to family, to friends, to any job, when you are used to lose to be able to win, and then you become much more resilient, much more tougher, more grinder, and then you keep going. And I think that's the spirit of the tennis player. I think the tennis player is very adaptable and is an incredible competitor.
That's a phenomenal answer. So to parents and coaches out there, you learn more from your losses. Don't be afraid to lose. That's a great answer. Looking at your successes as the Spanish Davis Cup captain, I believe you were the captain of the team for 3 years, and you won the Davis Cup in 2008, correct, with the Spanish team. How and why should junior players include team competition as part of their tennis journey?
Well, team is fundamental. First of all, because we tennis players, we are all about ourselves. So, and we have to be like that because we have to believe in ourselves. The belief and the confidence and the positiveness and everything about yourself, it has to be there to don't struggle in those difficult situations and in those moments of adversity. You lose points and make a double fault, and you have to forget, erase, and then think on the next serve or on the next return that you have to go out with your best option, so we become full of ourselves. And so when we go in a team, it becomes like a huge difference, because it's not only about you rely to the others, you play with them, you share with them, and sometimes you're gonna play, sometimes other one is gonna play, but that the spirit of playing for someone or for something is not only for you, I think it's an incredible experience for us, because it makes us much better. And I always talk about the experience when we were little in Spain, and we played so many club matches, and you had that print of your club it was like your DNA. So you will play for your club, you will not change club at all. So you just want your club to do well, and you have that property of belonging to something, and not only belonging to you. And I think that is a very balancing thing. And this experience with the Davis Cup, of course, I was lucky, because I was responsible of the changing of an era, because we had so many great players, and we won in most of the times on clay, but we were always losing on hard courts. So I took the job, and I knew that from the 16 teams in the world group, 14 we were playing away. So, and Spain never won away, because they put us on indoor hard or indoor carpet, and we going down. So, but it was the moment that this incredible generation that was coming out with the super lieutenant Rafa, but then with David Ferrer and Feliciano and Fernando, that at the end, during those 3 years, these three players, David, Feliciano, and Fernando, become the base of the team, and they were super young. They never won or anything. And when Rafa came, and then we were super team. And when they came, we were also a very good team. And so these guys, they had the chance in the final. The year that we won in 2008, we won 3 matches away, which never happened in for Spain ever. And we beat Argentina, that they had 2 top 10s without Rafa, that we had 3 top 30s, which was a challenge. But they managed to play incredible, and Feliciano and Fernando, they took their backpack the country, and they end up winning. So and those moments of living together and sharing and putting together not only your energy, but the energy of a group of people, counting on the masseurs and on the people around and the people who help. You know, in the team is not about yourself, it's about a big group of people having the same energy in the same moment, and then the state, it just blows. It just blows, because the moments that you are down, you just go out for them, and they drive you up. It's like when you play with a full stadium, you know, like it's like you floating, because everybody is with you. So that energy, you can feel it, and it was an amazing moment of my career to share that with these incredible players, because they were so good, and they gave so much from them.
Well, congratulations on that. And it seems like it goes back to a comment that you made earlier about the ability to adapt well, all those adapting aspects you mentioned about playing the away matches. Can we switch? Now, we did kind of segue into your coaching career, but moving forward, you are the founder and CEO of the Emilio Sanchez Academy. And you now have 4 locations. No, I think 5 actually. Spain in Barcelona, China in Nanjing, you have one in Dubai, Naples, Florida, and now in Atlanta. And recently, the Emilio Sanchez Academy has been recognized as the #1 tennis academy in the world. Can you tell us how you were able to achieve that?
Well, I don't know. I think that title was they done it in one of these big platforms in the internet, and the people was voting. So you know, it takes a lot of value that the people vote us in comparison with other academies that they have many more resources, much better facilities, and much bigger promotion, and huge sponsors, no? So for us, that in a difficult year, 2020, we were recognized that way by almost everybody, because as well we were doing tournaments, and we were fighting this COVID with very small infrastructure. It goes back to this fighting spirit, and this hard work, and this big effort that everybody from my team makes, and this discipline as well. So it goes back to the essence values that you try to show, that if I look myself as a player, or I look in my family with my mother, the way she treats us, those values, they are so strong. And then when you go through these difficult moments, and you have students, and you, that they stay there, and you treat them well, and when I talk to Andy Murray or Dimitrov or someone, they only remember the hard work, or they only remember the effort and the respect, you know. So at the end, we as a coach, I may think, oh, I need to change this forehand, but it's not the forehand that it counts. It counts how much I am on top of it when the player is down, to be there and to care for that forehand, because it's gonna go back to the old grip, and let's keep working, and let's do it one more time. And I think that we are not like our facilities are nice and big, but what makes the biggest difference is the people that work with me, that they have the same philosophy, the same, they all by to promote the same identity, and the most important is that we are not the ones that are the important. The important is that any student, independently for the level, it goes up on and it improves the level when he plays. And we are a type of academy that we stay a lot in the difficult moment of the matches, so we try to be always with them when they compete. And I think we are very proud of what we have achieved with not so many resources. So, and lately We try also to expand, to go to all these new places like Atlanta. We are in the Lifetime Club that was always a classical club from American tennis. They did the Atlanta Open and so on. We're working with them to try to regenerate the competition tennis. And in our academies, we continually doing a lot of events. And we do more than 30 events in Barcelona and in Naples. Those are the two ones that we have the boarding, we have the school, we have the education part, and we have the big teams. On the other ones, we just do the tennis part, which becoming very important to promote our industry and our system and who we are, no? But when they recognize you, it's good for the ego. But what it counts is that at this moment, I have people on the court that they are giving and putting on the court even more effort and more hard work than myself. And I think that's the key of the success. This is not about me and me, it's about a group of people that they think the same and they love to have the same shirt and do well.
It's very obvious.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's very obvious that you embody that culture. You have a culture of what you said, of fighting spirit and of discipline. And with that being said, can I ask you, what is your personal coaching philosophy?
Well, my philosophy is to try to understand the pathway of with who you teach, no? And so if we take a student from scratch at 5 years old, so it's gonna take, let's say that he wants to be number one in the world. So it's gonna take him 15 to 20 years to be there. So if we take him maybe at 10, we have players that come at 14, or some that they come already when they are really already on their junior years and they want to start to work on the details. We cannot take everybody under the same thing. The philosophy, it goes what I just said. It goes with the important values that we want to print on the people. And to try to, the sooner you get them, the more you're gonna be able to work and create the right habits on their character, because all those values become part of their character and become important for them. So if we take a player, like let's say that a pro call me that wants to train with me and has a very different values, it's gonna be very difficult that we match up. But the sooner we take, and that's why we do the educational part, we try to make an impact on these players to become the best version of themselves that they can become on these different stages of the pyramid, which is not the same the demand that you're going to ask for a 10-year-old to the 14-year-old, because maybe they can be similar demands on the technical, but the tactical on the 14-year-old is going to be more demanding, and then the physical is going to start to pick up because it's developing, and then but the higher competition is going to require a better mental state, better decisions, better handling the fireworks that they come in the brain when you start to compete and you go to those difficult moments of adversity. So we try more competitions. This is a seminar for competition, people that compete a lot. The mental part is the one that we try to explain and to be closer when they start to compete, and we try to replicate the mental part, which is almost impossible, as much as we can on the day-to-day and on the practice, because it's a huge challenge. Maybe only the
challenge.
Yeah, big players arrive to maximize that, and that's why they become so good in those situations. But if you see the big matches, at the end they are decided by mental state and by how players react in difficult situations.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's get to know your student, know their values, and get them to be the best version of themselves. That's just great advice. So we only have about 5 more minutes, Emilio, and I've got 3 questions, so we want to try to get through these quickly. What advice can you give parents on how to nurture their child's development, particularly in the competitive space?
Tennis is a magnetic sport for parents, because there are many different types of parents. Parents that they just put the players to play because they want the player to play. Parents that they make them play because the player likes to play. And if there is the moment that the player starts to get the passion and gets in love with the sport, with the competition, that can be in both journeys. Parents, they have to be really careful because it's the journey from the student. So the parent has to be like the companion, but cannot be part from the thing. I always tease my mom. My mom, imagine she had my sister went to Pepperdine, so she was a really good player. I was top 10, my brother was top 30, my sister was #1 in the world. So imagine how many matches she showed. So, and my mother's system is very clear. She could see the point that the match turns around. And she knows very well, but I always tease her, say, okay, so now that happened, no? 40-30, and then there she made this and lost the match. How we change that? How we go to practice and change that? So, because it's very easy to have an opinion about a match, but how much that opinion can affect on the soul of the player, because the player, and what the parents don't understand, is that independently if they win or lose, when a player loses 6-0, 6-0, is playing for the parent. So imagine the frustration that if you play for someone that you lose 6-0, 6-0, and the parents start to push you or be negative or be a bit aggressive on the things for that player, what the end of the thing, say, I want to impress my father, and here is him pushing me and telling me the thing. So you have to be really on the side and try to support and surround your player with the people that will help him to make the steps and explain to him, because it's such a difficult sport and you need to lose so much that this player has to find a way to react to that and make those points that make him win the matches and then enjoy together. And there is a very important moment later that the parent, if the player starts to do well, is going to jump and be very important, because the agent is going to come, and the agent is, when the money comes, is going to make the father important. So the father don't have to be important on the tennis part. The father has to be important on the human part and on the economical part. And he's going to be the top guy. But if you become important on the tennis part, maybe the relationship is going to break a lot, and you have big chances in the youth that they quit, because no one likes to see failing in front of the father. No one wants to show the father that he's a failure. Maybe you can accept with the friends, but not with the parents. So I always tell the parents, don't worry, be patient, take time, and let the kid grow, because he needs to improve so many things to excel.
I heard you say at the very beginning, basically parents kind of need to stay out of the way, because it's not their journey. It's the player's journey. That was very, very impactful for me. Thank you for that. What can you suggest to coaches on how to assist players when it comes to competing?
Well, I always get very impressed, because here in our country, in US, they are probably the best coaches in the world. But they are coaches that they work on the technical and a bit on the tactical. But many of these top coaches, they are not with the players on the moments that the player loses the soul. So what I recommend the coaches, which is the most difficult because it's the most demanding economically, is to be with the player when they compete. The players here, they are alone. And they are alone. When you are alone, it's very difficult that you come out. And on top, there is the very strict ruling about the coaching that the player cannot get any assistance, and he's completely alone. Okay, you can say, okay, we grow more and we develop more because we have to make decisions. Yeah, but how, at what price? How many people with incredible talent, they give up because they feel alone? And even more with the girls, because they have to make such a big effort, bigger than the men socially, that when they are alone and they see it so difficult, they just stop. And that's why many people at 15, 14, they stop. Look at the high school numbers, how many they go to college. So, and that's an incredible number of players that we lose completely because they play little and because they are alone. And in that moment, and there is not belonging. So because if you belong to high school, it's never attached to to a college. So we need to work on those players to keep them in. And one way is being with them in the tournaments and caring for them and supporting them.
That's a great answer. Last question, Emilio. Thank you for taking the time to read our junior playbook. What feedback would you like to share with us? What do you think about it?
I think it's very impressive because you guys went and researched a lot of places, and you went to do a lot of the things that they need to do, like a physical study about what you wanted to do, and there is very, very great points that you're gonna be able to work on. But you need to convince. You need to convince everyone. And you need to arrive to the clubs, and that's one of the, I think, bigger challenges that you guys have here in your country, is that you need to go back to the club essence. When I compare it to my country, to Spain, one of the biggest successes is that there is many clubs that they are driving, many clubs that they do competition, many clubs that they do a lot of tournaments, and many clubs that they feed the pyramid. And here, what I see is that there is many clubs that they do really well, and they have many students, but they don't pass so much to high school, and then from high school they don't pass to college. So you need to find a way with what you do in that document, is that how many people is gonna be part of that. How many people can you envision that is gonna be doing what you're saying that you're doing? So you need to form the coaches. You need to be part of the training, because for me, I think that one of the things that I'm missing is that it mentions there is that you should create, I think, like a board of experts, how you want American tennis to be in the next 20 years. And then form the people that is going to be part of that project and arrive to the maximum number of facilities, clubs that they working on development. And then when you create a philosophy and a system, and then it's going to be easier that more players go and flow. But America is so big that is a big, huge challenge. I say, if I have to work on that, how will I arrive to so many places, so many clubs, that most of the people, that directors in those clubs, they do so well financially? How do we convince them to go to competition, which is not as lucrative and is much more hard work? But we can only do it through the passion. And the people who do very well have very commercial schools, and so at the end they have that drive that I want to go coach, I want to go on the tour, I want to go on the juniors, and those crazy guys that they prefer the passion of the competition towards the commercial part of the doing very well. That's the ones that the USTA has to work with, and to try to print this handbook that you're putting together. And I'm sure that there is a lot of people crazy like me that we're gonna try to be part of that playbook.
Well, thank you very much for your kind words, and we agree. It's a challenge being as big as we are in the United States, which is why we're trying to put so much into education. So, Emilio, that's all the time we have for today. I really cannot thank you enough. It is such a privilege and honor, not only for me, but for the USTA in general, to be able to get some insights and learn some from you. You're a legend of the sport, and we're lucky to have you. Thank you so very much. Thanks
to you, and good luck. And put it all together, that if there is hard work and discipline and a lot of guys like you around, I'm sure that it's gonna be much better. Thank you.
Having advanced from the junior ranks to playing Division I college tennis, I can personally attest to the importance of that transition from high school to college. One common topic we've been discussing these last 3 days has been the importance of achieving success on and off the court. Let's welcome two coaches immersed in just that for their student athletes. Grant Chen has taken a unique path to head coach at SMU. His love of tennis led him to volunteering as student manager at UCLA. That led to being assistant coach for the Bruins and now head coach at SMU. Tracy Green shares a similar goal, now in her 14th year coaching in the Ivy League. Tracy made history when she became the first female African-American head coach at Harvard. That followed playing at the University of Florida, where she was part of an NCAA championship team. Two top-level coaches with different paths, but one common goal. Let's welcome in Grant Chen and Tracy Green.
Thank you very much. I want to welcome Tracy Green and Grant Chen to our conversation today. And both of these two coaches are literally two of my favorites. Their energy is contagious, their passion for our game. They're incredible college coaches, but truthfully, what motivates me when I talk to both of them is their interest in doing what's right for our sport as a whole. And they have a great breadth of knowledge. So excited to share 25 minutes with them today. And today's topic, which is a passion of mine, I think both of them as well, is this idea of how do you successfully transition from being a junior player into a college player. So excited to dive into about 5 or 6 questions specific to that topic. The first being centered around recruiting, which probably takes up 30 to 50% of both these folks' time. And really, when you look at a player, what are you looking for? And I'm sure there's an academic component to it. I'm sure there's probably an athletic component to it. There's probably a competitive component to it. And there's probably some intangibles that you may look for. But same question for both of you, but I'd like to start with Tracy, kind of around that question.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Carl, everybody from the USTA for putting this together. Looking at recruits, it's fun for me and our staff. We actually love going out there on the road recruiting, but it is a process. We look at ratings, we look at rankings, we look at everything that we can to make the best decisions possible. Ultimately, character always wins out for us. So it's not about that person who always has that top ranking. It could be that hard worker who's been grinding over the years, who even when they're down, they have their heart in it, stuff like that. But every day we try to do a little bit of recruiting so we learn more and more about everyone who's out there, at least as much as we can, because we think it's vital, obviously, to the success of our program.
How do you judge character, Tracy, when you go to watch a recruit? Is it just the recruit? Is it the parents as well that you kind of look at? Is it their background from, as a high school player and also a junior competitive player?
It's definitely a combo, Tim. It's getting to know the player, the parents, really everything we can. Again, we try to get on the road and see that person play as much as possible. So hopefully we see that person play when they're winning and they have an easy match, right? We see that person play in a just hard battle, knockdown, drag out situation. We see how they react, how they perform. We try to see them over time to actually watch someone's progress. And you mentioned parents, getting to know the parents, the family. That's a big key because we're all kind of on the same team. So really getting as much information as we can to try to make the best fit. And some people ultimately aren't going to be the best fit, and that's okay. But ultimately, that's where we want to go.
Great. Grant, same question for you. And I know you're a Bulldog recruiter out there, and you look at a lot of different attributes when evaluating a player.
Well, I always think recruiting is similar to fashion. It just never ends. Sometimes people ask you, when is your recruiting season? And there isn't one. It's just kind of constantly evolves and keeps going. But some of it is relationship based. I think that's one of the fun things of the whole recruiting process. A lot of the kids who maybe don't end up with me or don't end up choosing the school that I'm at, it's still fun to see them out there competing, playing against them, and following their progress over their couple years of college. Because you establish such a great relationship with these prospects and their families that if they find a different situation, for me, I'm very happy for them that they found something that makes sense for them. But ultimately, recruiting is very similar to a lot of the things Tracy mentioned, was fit, character, potential. You want to hope that their best tennis is still ahead of them. And I really think getting to know the families, getting to know their personal coach, their upbringing, their doubles partner, the people that are around them is critical in figuring out who these people are, who they want to be and what are they striving for down the road. And hopefully that they can always make an impact, and it's a two-way street, that they can come into a tennis program and be successful. And then the team can also help them to achieve some very special things.
Yeah, I love that two-way street. That's a great analogy. Tracy, you played on a storied program, were an incredible player, top 10 individual player in college tennis, won a national championship. And, you know, as a player, what carried over to your coaching style today? And do you reflect back to those days, and what have you taken with you that's helped you be the great coach that you are today?
Well, thank you for those compliments. I'll take them. I'll pay you a little bit later, Tim. Yeah. But I mean, college tennis, you can't trade it for anything. Some of my best, my fondest memories are from college tennis. And believe it or not, it's not so much winning the NCAA championship, you know, as our team. It's really just all those memories with the team, being on that bus, being on the van, you know, flights, social settings, all those things. All those bonds that really make the team stay strong. And that's truly what I try to carry over to our team, just making them understand the strength and the power of our team. So when I do go back and tell stories, they're usually stories of how we came back, right, from being down. Although I still can, you know, draw on, you know, more recent experiences. But that's really what it's all about, those bonds and how you mature along the way and become a better person.
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the greatest things about college tennis is really the team aspect and the lessons learned through those team experiences. Grant, while you're at SMU now, you had an incredible run at UCLA and worked closely with two really top college players that transitioned successfully in the top 100 on the ATP, and Marcus Giron and Mackie McDonald. And I think it's really exciting on both the female side and male side to see the college players really having an impact in making that transition, much more so the last 10 years than you know, maybe the previous 10 or 20 years. And what did you see in Mackie or Marcos that, you know, you thought they would be very successful in making that transition?
Well, first off, I think college tennis is really one of the greatest platforms as a pathway to pro tennis. You know, even just recently with Cameron Norrie winning Indian Wells in the fashion that he did, he played some high level tennis, and each and every season, you know, he's climbed the rankings. And I happened to be with his college coach the last couple of days, and you know, we chatted about it. But you know, I think we're all so proud, even though he didn't play for me. That's just something we're all so proud of, is seeing the college players out there, Jen Brady, Mackie, Marcos, of course, but so many others. I mean, John Isner, Stevie Johnson, Bradley Klon, Maxime Cressy, who was another player who played for me at UCLA. But I think a few things that really stood out when these guys are out there and these players are out there is one, the dream, two, the desire, and three, the passion. You know, I think at every stage, they always felt that this is what they wanted to do. It was their goal. You know, yes, they wanted a great education. Yes, they wanted those unbelievable years in college, but they had that dream to play pro tennis. And it was always about preparing them for that next level. And as hard as they worked and as much as they've done, you know, in some ways, there's so much to that transition process that I still think they were overwhelmed their first year, couple years on tour. You know, none of them really had that immediate success right out of college, but it took little by little. And as they kept on going each season on tour, you could see that maturity, that growth, the development in their game, their fitness. You know, seeing Mackie be able to go 5 sets at the US Open and come out with the W. Marcos in the exact same situation. Cressy had an unbelievable run at the US Open, winning a couple rounds. So, you know, just so fun to see all these guys, you know, do what they love and chase the dream that they've all been pursuing, because they're living every college student and every tennis player on our team's dreams.
Yeah, I like the word maturity, and I think, you know, college provides you that opportunity from 18, whether you stay for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years, you know, to mature and leverage some of those assets that now come with college in terms of great coaching that you all provide in terms of the tennis piece, but people don't realize there's also strength and conditioning coaches now dedicated to the sport. There's nutrition coaches, there's mental toughness coaches. You've got to learn to balance your day between the academic rigors, also the team and individual seasons, while keeping your dream alive. But all that adds up to maturing, not only physically and your tennis game, but also the mental component. And more so today than ever, I think it's a real proven fact out there that oftentimes you're not hitting your peak till 26, 7, 8, 29. Now people are playing till their mid 30s. And so I think it's even given more credibility to, hey, utilize the tools in college to continue your dream and continue your pathway. It's a great pathway to do so. Tracy, I know you both, deal with a lot of parents and private coaches. What advice do you find yourself offering parents of aspiring players, and then also private coaches of aspiring players that both have major impacts on our juniors?
That's a great question. I would actually piggyback more on what Grant said, talking about growth. College really is not a destination. It's really part of that whole, maturation process, like we just talked about. The more coaches, the more, high school players and junior players can see it as, a part in the process to get better and better and better, no matter what your goal is, whether your goal is to go pro and play pro, or, or just be a top player on your team, or even make the team. Once you get into school, or once you, get on a team, it's not over. Your development is still there. There's so many aspects of your game that you can improve on. And then sometimes you actually will need to improve on, because there's so much parity right now in our sport at the college level, right? We're so robust, we're so international. So really to see that this time is a time to keep growing as you're getting ready for college. And then once you get there, keep on going over the summers, right? Over the breaks. And of course, those months leading up to college, once you're already committed or accepted, what have you.
Yeah, great. And Graham, when you kind of visit with parents, and do you have any key things you find yourself, saying to them and or the private coaches?
Having that open communication, I think, is absolutely essential. To be with these young men and women between the ages of 18 and 22, 23. I mean, these are 4 or 5 years of real critical time in their lives. They're young adults. They're trying to transition to become independent. But in some ways, Tracy and I, we play kind of a third parent. We play mentor, we play coach, we play friend, we play, advisor. So there's so many different hats that we wear, and it's trying to make sure that we're all calibrated with what the expectation is, but also the direction of what we're going. I want to make sure that my development plan for the player is very similar to the private coaches, and also what the expectations and with the parents. And I take my role very seriously, as these parents have entrusted me with their son. And I think these are really critical things, even just this past year and a half. A year ago, I would have to call a parent and potentially say their son was in quarantine because of contact tracing. But this is going to, these things are being taken care of, and their son is still safe and in good hands and taken care of. So a lot of it is beyond tennis, but it's just making sure that we're all thinking of the student athlete's best interests at heart, and that we're all moving in that direction, whether it's tennis related, academics, career, physical strength, and mental well-being.
Yeah, that's great. I started in my opening of saying some of the things that when I visit with both of you about your energy and passion for the game and your knowledge of the game. And, one thing I think we've really started to try to emphasize more at the USTA is the word fun. And sometimes it's hard as a coach to utilize that word. Maybe actions speak louder than words, and we do it, through our actions. But how do you, as a college coach, sort of instill the fun within your team? And I think these dual matches have become so pressure packed and so intense, and really the whole season is long and draining, and the expectations are higher than ever. on players and coaches. But so how, when you think about the word fun, do you work that into your day to day? Tracy, I'll start with you.
Well, I think first off, we try to use the word fun as much as we can. We try to make competing fun. Sometimes competing can be, nerve wracking or just make people, get freaked out in general, but we try to make everything we do fun as much as possible. So that's, if it's the beginning of practice, do something fun. Maybe it's a fun game. If it's the end of practice, maybe a game where we come together as a team. We also have traditions on our team that our team can kind of look forward to. Like right now we're in the fall, we have pumpkin carving coming up. So it's the team versus team competition. We all look forward to that kind of event. So I can name a few more things, but you have to kind of build in the fun, but make it part of what you do, and feel free to just say it as much. Say this is a fun game. We're going to just, if you say fun a lot, it becomes fun.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Grant?
Well, along with that, I think it's building a schedule that makes sense. Obviously, there are times in the academic calendar where, during midterms week, that's already a stressful, packed time in the kids for that month. And so maybe practices that week are a little adjusted, or maybe they're a little bit later in the day, or maybe a little bit shorter. But I think keeping things fresh is part of making things fun. So every day is not just, hey, we're drilling, we're playing sets, we're running the mile. I think there's so many different ways to get what you want out of the players while keeping things fresh. So we're not always in the gym lifting weights every single day. We might do yoga, we might do Pilates, we might go to the aquatic center and hop in the pool. Now they might only last 5 minutes in the pool, but it's something different. Yeah. So, I think here we are, it's our job as coaches to try to keep that day-to-day process an exciting one by keeping things fresh. And I think when you keep things fresh, it'll remain fun. But just similar to what Tracy talked about, we are now going to start a pumpkin carving event, just like a page out of the Harvard women's tennis team book. So Tracy, I'm going to take that from you. But, otherwise, yes, we play some Up and Down the River. You throw in music, and, the captains get to choose the playlist. And, I think it finds different ways to keep things fresh. Sometimes we practice in the morning, sometimes we practice in the afternoon, sometimes we practice at night under the lights, because I think those are always different settings. It's funny doing a Sunday night practice under the lights, and they've had the whole weekend kind of to rest, and you get them very fresh. They've had a nice day to kind of reset, sleep in. So I like mixing up the time of when we practice as well.
Yeah, both great answers. And knowing that our audience is really the junior space, whether it's a junior player, junior parent, or a private coach. I don't know if the two of you would agree with this, but I think one of the really, really unique pieces of college tennis is the team aspect. You played your junior career, and probably 90%, maybe even 95% of it is sort of this individual based competition. And I think when they transition to college, it's sort of this natural fun. I think they're so looking forward to being a part of a team, and that whether you play number 5, 6, it still counts as the same point to your team score as a number 1 player. And just, if you have a down day, you're the number 8 or 9 player and you've had a down day, you've got somebody that might pick you up that you admire, that keeps you motivated, inspired. And, I'm one of the things USTA is looking at is the team aspect of junior tennis. And could there be more team play? And a little curious on what you all think specific to the team piece, if you feel similar, and then how team could play a bigger role in junior tennis as well.
Tracy, take the lead.
Sure. I think being on a team definitely builds character, and it's that character piece that we keep talking about and coming back to. It's thinking of someone other than yourself, right? That's what we need out here in this world, right? When you have to think about, okay, is my doubles partner, doing this, X, Y, and Z, am I encouraging the person next to me? It's things like that that really help, create a person to become a better leader, right? So I think at the end of the day, when you are on a team, the more team things we can do, the better. And it's also fun, like Grant was saying, when you're on a team and you're having fun, it makes you, feel better in your own day. So yes, I 100%, applaud the USTA for putting together this pathway. I think it's excellent. I think it builds better tennis players down the road and ultimately better people.
I think the team is fantastic. Zonals, intersectionals, Junior Davis Cup, Junior Fed Cup. I think these are wonderful activities. Even the regional events and spring team championship every March in Mobile. I think these are great activities. I even would look at taking it one step further, which is not only do we have a team event or competition, you have 1 or 2 days of practice leading up to that together. And a lot of times I think it just makes for such a wonderful experience. There's an old African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that team dynamics and that environment is so positive. And I think it's really positive for juniors to know that they can do this with a group with them. And that's why I think clinics and camps, sometimes that's such a positive thing, because it's not just a one-on-one lesson with an individual instructor. You're doing it in a group environment. And, even my junior upbringing, I had a couple colleagues and classmates, and, I was in the middle of the pack, but we all kind of pushed each other to get better. The better ones, I try to help them get better, and they were trying to help me to get better. And I think as we all, grew in the juniors from 12s to 14s to 16s to 18s in college, it was fun to see everyone kind of take their games to what they wanted to make of it. But I think the team is so positive and a really a wonderful special experience, which is why I've loved college tennis so much. And I think that's why most of us remain in this industry.
Yeah. I've often wondered, had kind of a wild dream, if junior tennis had a specific team season, much like college has a team season. What would that do? We've got a wonderful model in the high school space, and 350,000 players playing high school tennis. And, Ben Sheldon, my son, who was a nice little player, but 2 years ago played Ben Sheldon in the state finals of the Florida High School Championship. And, Ben played high school tennis his whole time. And I think learned that team aspect and leadership piece. And it had a positive impact, I believe, on his development as a player. And fast forward 2 years, and now I think he just won the All-American Championship and was Kalamazoo, I believe, winner, and won a round at the US Open. So I think there's a way to leverage the team piece and the pathway. Last question, and thanks so much for your time and insight. But centered around the new USTA Junior sort of pathway playbook. I think you've had a chance to look at it, and any takeaways that might be relevant to this audience that you kind of when you read that stuck with you.
Grant, why don't you go?
Well, I think the wonderful part of this playbook is that there are several different pathways one can take. And that's what I take most, is what worked for me, or the pathway I chose may have been a little bit different from Tracy's or, another colleague of mine, but every junior will experience something that makes the most sense for them. And that's why, as you're searching for a college down the road, part of this whole recruiting process is finding the right fit. And as if you can take one thing from this playbook, I would suggest that not every pathway is the same. So some may experience the high school tennis that led to this, and some might not. And, Mackie McDonald play a couple years of high school tennis. Marcus Garone played 3 seasons for his Thousand Oaks team. I know that. I watched some of them. And there are others who didn't play high school tennis, but they all ended up at a university that they love. They're all on the pro tour now. And I think it's fun to see those progress. But it's a wonderful blueprint to explore various pathways to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, great. Tracy, anything different to add or similar?
It's the same thing. Just having that clear multiple, pathways, like Grant mentioned, is vital, right? So many people are new to tennis and they're not sure which direction to turn. I think it's probably, long overdue, but we got it right in front of us. Let's go ahead and jump on it.
Yeah. Well, thank you, both of you. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your passion for our sport as a whole, not just college tennis. You both are true ambassadors, and just really appreciate all you're doing. And thanks for your support of the USTA as well. And hope you have a great spring season, and look forward to seeing you at the campus, and certainly be following both your teams' progress.
Tim, thank you. Great to hear from you, and appreciate all your support for the game of tennis. What you guys do makes a huge impact in what we do. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Next up, we discuss experience as a player and parent. Our guest is a champion in both categories. Mary Jo Fernandez was a top 5 players in singles and doubles. She holds a pair of Grand Slam titles and 2 Olympic gold medals in doubles. After her playing days, she captained the United States Fed Cup team for 8 years. Her work on ESPN speaks for itself. She's the parent of 2 young athletes, so as you can see, she knows what it's like to be a busy working mom. Let me catch my breath just thinking about all of that. Let's catch some time with Mary Jo Fernandez.
Well, Mary Jo, thank you so much for making the time. We're good friends, but it's an honor to interview you and spend some time with you, pick your brain a little bit. You've been a great champion. I'm going to go back to my first memory of you, but someone who succeeded both on the women's tour, top ranking of number 4, and on the doubles tour, which I want to talk a little bit about. Made a seamless transition into becoming our Fed Cup captain and doing a phenomenal job in that respect. And one of the top and most respected commentators in broadcast. So really, thank you for making the time. Looking forward to having a conversation. And it's great to see you doing well.
Thank you, Martin. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it. This is great.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So Mary Jo, my first memory of you, pigtails, Orange Bowl, 1981. I believe I was playing the 12s.
Oh my gosh, we were playing next to each other.
And we were playing next to each other. Now, that wasn't the beginning, but I have a vivid recollection of just watching you as such a great competitor, such a great player, but also that special relationship that you had with your dad.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you came into the sport and how that relationship developed?
Absolutely. But I do remember playing right next to you, and I think you were playing David Cass, and I was playing Gabriela Sabatini. So
that's right.
It was quite the matchups, later stages of the tournament. I think it was at the Biltmore. I think that's where we were.
That's right. You got it right.
Yeah. But so it's interesting how I started. It was a little bit by luck. My dad is from Spain. He grew up playing soccer, but played tennis socially. And I have an older sister, Sylvia, we call her Mimi, and she's 10 years older than I am. And she had scoliosis. So the doctor recommended that she play tennis to strengthen the muscles around her spine. So my dad would take her after school every day and would feed her balls for, half hour, 45 minutes. And I would tag along. And so I was about 3 or 4 when that was happening. And at that time, there were no little rackets.
Sure.
So my dad, chopped off the grip of a wooden racket, and he shaved the handle off. And he basically was like, okay, Mary Jo, go hit against the wall and don't bother us. Let me, play with your sister and entertain yourself, and we'll be good. So I did that every day after school, and I loved it. And I got home and I would hit against the wall in my room or against the refrigerator in the kitchen. And I was sort of driving my parents crazy. But a few years later, so maybe now I'm almost 6, the local pro that would give lessons at these public courts in Kendall Lakes came up to my dad and he said, I've been watching your daughter and I'd like to give her some lessons. And my dad thought he meant my sister. And he said, she has this back issue. She's just doing it for the
Got
exercise.
it. Sure. Yeah.
And he said, no. I mean, the little one, I've been watching her on the wall and she has really good eye-hand coordination. So my dad was like, okay, sure. So that's how I started. I think being in Miami, in South Florida was like a great place to pick up tennis because there's so many tennis courts, so many players, so many coaches. It was just a very easy sport to practice all the time. And, slowly I got better. And the next thing you know, I started playing tournaments. But the funny thing, Martin, was that my mom really knew nothing about tennis. And my dad would come home and he'd say, this pro is telling me that, Mary Jo is pretty good and that she should play and compete. And my mom's like, what does he know? We should find out if there's anything to it. So I don't know if you remember him, but Gardner Malloy, a great past US champion, he was the head pro at one of the clubs in South Florida. And I don't know why my mom had a connection to him, but she's like, why don't we call Gardner and have him evaluate Mary Jo and see what he says. So they took me up there and I remember it vividly. We played on clay and he hit with me for 1 hour. And after the hour, he sat down with my parents and all he said, he didn't say she's good. He didn't say she could do this or that. All he said was, I recommend that you put her to play as many tournaments as possible so she learns how to lose. That was the advice he gave my parents.
Wow.
And my parents took it to heart. And I played tournaments every single weekend. And I lost every single weekend. But you learn how to deal and you learn how to, deal with adversity and not everything happening your way or the way you'd like it to be. Took a while to start winning, but then you start winning. And then that was the next thing, learn how to be a good winner. But yeah, that was the advice we got early on and it stuck with me. I played a ton. I competed so much. And then you start playing the state tournaments, the national tournaments.
Sure. That's such a great story, MJ. Thanks for sharing that. When I think about what you just shared, I think it's important that you started hitting on your own.
Yeah.
So just that drive and that spark that came from you and kind of exploring the game on your own terms, and then your dad kind of taking it to the next level. I really like that progression. So one of the themes of this is play to competition. What was that process like for you, getting more serious about competing, getting more serious about practicing? And how did your dad keep it fun for you?
So the competition came naturally. Again, because it was easy to play tournaments, it happened, frequently. I ended up really enjoying the competition. It motivated me to try to win at some point. Back then, I looked up to the top players in the world, Chris Evert, Bjorn Borg, and, their game was based on consistency. So my goal each day was, to hit one extra ball that I did the day before. And one of my first coaches, Don Petrine, who really, developed a good part of my game early on, we'd hit cross courts, over and over. And one day, okay, you got 72. Now we're going to try to get 73. And then, and those were the goals. So that when I played and competed, the goal in the beginning was, okay, don't miss. I have to say, both my parents did a good job of balancing the competition with me being young. For them, school came first. That was number one priority, always. If I didn't do well in school, I wasn't going to be able to play. So I knew that I needed to focus and get good grades. But one story that I'm going to share always, stood out for me with my dad, because even though I'm a big believer that you need that person to support you and to push you to a certain degree. It's really hard for an 8-year-old to say on the weekends, hey, can I go hit on the ball machine for 2 hours? I tell everybody I probably would have rather watched cartoons, and stayed at home. So my dad was that person that would say, we're going to go hit on the ball machine. We're going to go to the wall. But we had a tournament, I'll never forget, up in Orlando, and we're driving. And halfway there, he says to me, I'm in the back seat. He says, Mary Jo, I was thinking, what would you rather do this weekend? Would you rather go to Disney World or would you rather play the tournament? And I said, Dad, is that a trick question? And he's like, no, I'm being honest. And I said, of course, I'd rather go to Disney World. And he's like, okay, we're going to Disney World. So,
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. So he knew, there has to be moments where the child has to be a child, and you have to do the average, child experiences. So I always appreciated that. And I felt like he understood it, that there had to be a balance. It couldn't just be work, hit, drill. That at some point you had to balance it out. One of my hobbies that I loved was video games. I loved, playing Pac-Man and Galaga and all that. And I remember with my tennis friends, he would take me on days after school or on the weekends. It's like, oh, let's go for an hour. And he'd give me the quarters, and there we'd go off. So I think that's important is to find that balance, because I think it's hard, like I said before, for a young, especially for anyone, but especially for a young person to be that single-minded and that focused and just, going at the same goal day after day without having breaks.
No, that's a beautiful story. And, what you talk about, having a parent or a coach who's a driver, that's so important. And that's a commonality that we see across the board. But always that person putting your development as a person first, which your dad obviously did.
Yeah.
It's pretty rare to see a player at your level have so much success in both singles and doubles. When did you start playing doubles, and what is it about doubles that you think maybe balanced out, the other piece, which was obviously singles and comes with a little bit more pressure?
I started playing doubles pretty early. I remember playing at nationals, maybe, I don't know, I was 9 or 10 years old. And the funny thing about it is, I tell my son this all the time now, is they told me you have to serve and volley. I mean, it wasn't a choice. Like doubles, you serve and volley first and second serve. And I never had even when I got better, I never had a big serve, but you can imagine when I was 10 years old, it was like a patty cake serve and I'd run into the net. But I loved it. It was like a new challenge. It was a new, a different game. And for me, it was definitely more fun because you got to share on the court the experiences with a friend or, someone that you practice with and work together. And I think I was always kind of the steady person, not a lot of ups, not a lot of downs. So I was pretty good at balancing usually my partner's emotions and was pretty positive all the time. So ironically, even though I trained for singles, I had better results in doubles. I ended up doing a lot better in doubles and won more titles in doubles, and my highlights of my career come from doubles. And I wouldn't trade that for the world, because you're still competing and you're still very focused, but it's not just about you anymore. You're trying to build your partner up. You're trying to stay as focused and positive as you can. And it's a little bit of a different skill set that you need for doubles. And I didn't know I had it, but I developed it, and it definitely did help my singles game as well. It helped my serve. It helped me be more comfortable at the net. And I always, I would tell my dad, I said, I'd rather play doubles than have to go practice after, my matches.
Great point. Probably the same thing that McEnroe would say, right?
Right. I think John said it at one point.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, I'd rather, go compete than have to go hit, against somebody. So it was fun. And, I wish there had been more tournaments back then. I think it's better now, but I wish, I'd been able to play even more when I was a young child developing. Got
it. One more question about your junior development before we transition a little bit. You won the Orange Bowl four times in a row. I'm sure each time there was more pressure to do well the next time. Obviously, you managed that pressure really well because you won all 4 times. How did your coach and your parents help you to manage that pressure during your junior career?
It's a good question. I think it helped that the Orange Bowl was in my backyard. It was, in Miami. Like we said, when we played next to each other, it was at the Biltmore. That was a 12 and under. The 14s was at the Hotel Marriott by the airport. And then we went to Flamingo Park. And I guess I grew up going to watch the Americans play at the Orange Bowl. So it was just kind of part of what I knew. And I never felt that much pressure. I would say that the only time I felt a little bit of pressure was the year I played the 16s. Gabriella Sabatini, who was one of my really close friends, skipped it and went from 14s to 18s. And I remember my dad, someone saying to my dad, why doesn't Mary Jo do the same thing? They're on the same path. And my dad said, no, she's got to win, or she's got to try to win her own division. But then Gabby won the 18s that year. And I was like, oh, geez, I better win the 16s. But again, I was very good at just playing match by match, doing what I knew how to do. And, you played familiar faces over and over again. And I ended up playing the same person in the 16s and the 18s final, Patricia Terabini from Argentina. So yeah, I mean, when you're going for the fourth one in a row, there's a little bit of talk about it, but it was still very much, okay, this is what you do next. This is the next step to get better. This is like
part of the process.
Part of the process. This is a part of the development. I mean, I never played thinking I was going to be a pro one day. It just sort of happened. That was like the next progression. Everybody that won the Orange Bowl in the 18s on the women's side, the next step was to play pro. So it was kind of like, whoa, okay, let's try this out now. And it was difficult. My parents, again, back to education, my friend Gabriella and Steffi, they all dropped out of school. And my parents said, okay, well, you can try playing pro, but you're not dropping out of school. You're going to, go to your 4 years of high school. So even though I turned pro my freshman year in high school, I played mainly in the summer. My school was great because they let me leave a month early to go play the French and stuff like that, and would help me take my finals when I got back. But, school still was the main priority. So looking back, Martin, I think the first time I felt real pressure was when I graduated high school. Was when all of a sudden, okay, now it's real. Now I'm 18. I have no excuse that, oh, she's still in school, so she's not practicing as much as everybody else. She can't do fitness because she has to, study. But now it's like, okay, now this is real. Like, this is my real job. This is what I'm doing full time. Let's see, am I going to be able to, to be the best and get to where people think I should be?
Well, you did a great job.
Oh, thanks.
And that's a perfect segue to the next question. After a really successful career, Mary Jo, and moving into the captaincy of Fed Cup, which is now Billie Jean King Cup, what was your philosophy at the beginning of that time as captain, and how did it evolve?
Well, I was really fortunate because I had great captains. I had great role models when I played. So when I first played on Fed Cup, Marty Reeson was my captain, and he was great, very positive, knew a lot about the game. And then, I had Martina for 1 year, and then I had Billie Jean King. And Martina obviously had just played, so she was very fresh off competing, so she knew, the game very well. But then Billie Jean just took it to another level. And what I learned from her was how much she cared about the person, not so much about the result, and how much she just wanted to make each of us better as people, as individuals, and as teammates. And that would, in her philosophy, carry on to the tennis court. But, when I got the honor to be Fed Cup captain, I remember Billie saying to me, I said, okay, Billie, well, what do you think? And she's like, remember, it's psychology. It's not so much about the X's and the O's. It's really learning each individual's personality and chemistry, and what works for one doesn't work for the other. And that's where you have to really pay attention. The tennis will be, will take care of itself. They play, they have their own coaches, they know what they're doing most of the time. But to get them to play at their best, you got to get to know them, and you got to get to know what clicks for each one of them. So I enjoyed that process, and I loved every minute of it. I thought that those Fed Cup weeks, they became like my second family. And even though it was nerve-wracking, sitting on the sideline and watching, it was a lot of fun. I really, really, look at it as one of the highlights.
Well, let me ask you this. I love what you said about Billie focusing kind of more holistically. In those weeks that you played, did you find that approach kind of freed you up and that you played with a little bit more freedom? What was that like for you?
I don't know if it freed me up, but it definitely gave me more, I guess, of a purpose each time I was on the court. She was pretty specific with what she wanted us to do.
Okay.
Billie Jean was, she was just the best. I quote her so often with my children, with, a lot of friends, because I remember her, and she says this all the time, like, there's no such thing as failure. It's feedback. So if you miss a shot, it's okay. Let's just learn from it.
Let's learn from it. Yeah.
Yeah. And, where it's in tennis, as you know, Martin, it's hard. You're playing every week and only one person's winning, and you lose a lot, and it can psychologically get to you. It can emotionally get to you. And that was another tough transition for me, because I had done so well in the juniors, and then I go pro, and I don't win a tournament for 4 or 5 years. And even though I was doing well, like I still was getting to quarters and maybe a semi here or there, and breaking the top, 20, you're not winning. You're not winning events anymore. And you have to have that right mentality and a little bit of thick skin to keep going. And Billie was great in that regard, because she was like, it's all part, like you said, part of the process. It's part of getting better. And as long as you know that you are doing everything possible to be the best that you can be on the court, off the court, whether it's, playing and drilling and with your coaches, fitness wise, nutritionally, everything that goes into it psychologically, then you look back and say, okay, I did everything that I possibly could.
I gave it 100%. Yeah.
Right. And that's where I feel good, is that when I look back, I feel like I did that. I feel like my parents helped tremendously, and my dad, put me with the best coaches. He was a big believer in, hey, if someone knows someone or something more than I know, we're going to go to that person and see what, they can offer. And then let's go to the next. And it was so fortunate, that he had that mentality. He was very open-minded. He didn't think he knew it all. But I have to say, at the end, when I retired, he felt like he was the best coach on the planet, because he's like, I know everything that Fred Stolle and Jose Garris and Tim Gullickson and Harold Solomon, and they all, I learned everything from them. So I feel like I'm the best coach. So we'd laugh about it, but
that's great.
In a way,
he was probably right. Yeah, right. Because obviously he had a growth mindset.
Yeah. So I think that was, for me, really lucky that I had a parent that was, willing to learn as well on the way.
Excellent. So really good transition. You've got 2 lovely children. One of them plays lacrosse at a really high level, and one of them plays tennis at a very high level. So I guess beginning with their intro into sports, how did you and your husband kind of, frame their interaction there and their activity? And then we can talk a little bit more specifically about your son, who's a very, very high level junior player right now.
Yeah, he's trying. So it's interesting. I only played tennis. I swam a little bit until maybe I was like 8, but then it was all tennis. And when we started talking about, okay, what activities do we want the children to do after school? It wasn't even a question that they were going to both play tennis. It's been my life. It's been everything I know, and all my friendships, all my connections, all my experiences have come from tennis. So I have a very positive outlook on the sport and what it can bring to everyday life. So, I told my husband we're going to introduce them to tennis no matter what. We'll see if they like it or not. But even if they don't like it, like I hope they learn the skill. So one day down the road, if somebody asks them to play, they'll be able to go out there and play. And I'll tell you something funny about that in a minute. So tennis was always in the works. They were always going to play tennis. But then I told my husband that I thought I was rare, that at such a young age, I just played the one sport and I was okay with it. I never got tired of it. I never got burnt out. I never said, I don't want to practice. But I kept thinking that's just probably not the norm. So we decided we're going to put them in a ton of sports and we're going to let them, pick for themselves what they like, what they do best, and the whole thing. So from an early age, they both played tennis, they swam, they played soccer. We tried t-ball, baseball. That one for me was tough. Long hours and everybody had to hit, and I was just like, no, we're skipping this one. I chose not to we live in Ohio, and ice hockey and ice skating was very popular. But being from Miami, I was like, I'm not going to the rink at 6 a.m. So I feel bad now because I wish they had those skills, but we never pursued that sport.
You got to have boundaries, right, MJ? There's
I
certain
had boundaries.
things
I said, I am
do.
not going to freeze. So we skipped those. But golf in the summertime. And then my daughter, halfway through middle school, switched from soccer to lacrosse. So we kind of threw everything at them. It ended up being tennis. For my daughter was tennis and soccer for a while. Then it became tennis and lacrosse. And then Nico was tennis and soccer. And I just thought it was a good combination to be able to do the individual and the team. My daughter gravitated to the team immediately. She played junior tennis for a little bit, didn't like it. Was pretty honest about it right away. Mom, this isn't for me. She had a hard time with the cheating. She had a hard time with the drama. And she had a hard time when anybody said, oh, I'm playing Mary Jo's daughter.
You're Mary Jo's daughter, yeah.
Yeah, she didn't like that at all. My son, on the other hand, I'll never forget one of his first tournaments. He played this boy that was like 3 or 4 years older who was killing him. Like Nico barely was winning points. And the kid was bullying him. The kid was like making calls for him, changing the score on him. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at Nico like, speak up. Like, you can't let this kid do this to you. Anyway, Nico loses 6-0, 6-0, comes off the court. I'm like, Nico, like, what? You can't let this boy like take advantage like that. And he's like, Mom, I had the best time. Like, that was so much fun. Like, I got to hit so many balls. And I realized, wow, I have 2 very different children.
Very different.
He just was happy, to be playing, and it didn't affect him. He didn't care that it was, not nice to him. So early on, my daughter was like, team. And Nico was like, I prefer individual. I prefer things in my own hands. But he loved his soccer. And it wasn't until he was about 12 or 13 that he had to give it up because the soccer program was requiring too much time. And he's like, no, I'd rather play more tennis. But I think, as a parent looking back now, I think that was a good move. I think it was good to have them try a lot of things out and do more than just the one. I think they complement each other.
Absolutely, really healthy. And again, that's a big pillar in our ADM, is introducing kids to multiple sports, helping them develop as an athlete first. For your daughter, that must have been so affirming for you to be like, yeah, no problem if you prefer lacrosse, right?
I had no issues whatsoever. I did tell her I wanted her to play once or twice a week, just so she kept the skill level up. So this was when she was about maybe 11 years old, 12 years old. And the 2 stories I'm going to tell you about my daughter is that when she got to high school, she said to me, Mom, I think I want to try out for the tennis team. And I was shocked. I was like, what? And she's like, yeah, a lot of my friends are on the team. And I said, okay. Well, at the time, her high school, and they still are, they're like a dynasty. They had a bunch of nationally ranked players. So I was like, Isabella, I said, you're not going to make the team. I said, you're going to have to, if you want to make this team, you have to practice like the next 4 months every day. And she's like, I'll do it, Mom. I'll do it. but my friends are on the team. I want to be on the team. And I couldn't believe it. She did. She put her head down. She practiced. I remember we were at Wimbledon. We'd go in the morning before I had to go to work. We'd hit balls. And she got the last spot on the team.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And she ended up winning, I think I've told you this before, she ended up winning state doubles one year and getting to the finals the next year. So doubles was her thing. She loved it. Like she excelled. And again, because she had played from when she was little, she knew a little bit about the game.
No, that's
But
great.
one more quick thing. The funny thing now is she's in college and she's playing lacrosse and she loves it. But as she's making friends, some of her friends have said, hey, why don't we play tennis this weekend? Some of the hockey guys or whatever teams, whatever. And she's like, okay, yeah, that'd be fun. Sure enough, she goes out there and they're like shocked that she knows how to play. And she's like, Mom, that was so much fun. I beat them. I'm like, oh, see, so playing tennis wasn't such a bad idea.
Oh, that's great.
So she's happy. She's happy that she knew the skill to be able to know how to play.
That's great. But that's such a great example, though, of the social pull for kids who even they may decide they don't want to play competitively. They don't want to play a bunch of tournaments, but the experience of playing in high school or playing in a club team in college, it's so enriching. So kudos to you for cultivating that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, you make great friendships, as you know, from any sport, but from tennis particularly, and you meet them from all over the country, from all over the world.
All over the world, yeah.
And it's really nice. I'm seeing that with my son now. He has such a good group of friends now from tennis, and it's really nice to see.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your son, because a while back I saw that you guys had a great relationship. He was still willing to listen to you, so you have to teach me how to do that with my kids. But that was special. And now he's playing at a higher level. He's more committed. The demands are higher. How have you and your husband kind of managed that evolution, making sure he has the opportunities that he needs to maximize, but also making sure that everything else stays in balance?
Yeah, it's a challenge all the time. And again, going back to my dad, trying to find that balance of being competitive and working hard and being driven and having a purpose, but also being a teenager. A lot of it for me has to come from the child. And I think in this regard, we're really fortunate because Nico's the one that calls the shots, and he's the one that says, I'm doing this, I'm going to practice from this hour to that hour, I have gym at this hour. Like, I never have to be the one to tell him, hey, aren't you going to go, practice this afternoon? So I think that's important. I think if it comes from the child, it's way easier. I think if you're pushing all the time, then it's tough on the relationship. I'm a big believer, you have to be the parent first. And I try as much as I can. And it's not easy because I feel like I know enough about the game where if I see something, I want to say it right away. So I'm learning to not always say what I see or what I think, but it's hard. So I try to be the mom, and that's why I'm always trying to get him the best coaches and people to guide him in that regard and be there for him for support, or if he has questions. He has changed. He doesn't listen to me as much as he used to, even though when push comes to shove, he'll be like, Mom, I just pretend sometimes. I just pretend to give you a hard time, but I'm listening. So I hope that's true. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I know how hard it is. I know, how hard it is to get to that next level. And all I can say is what we talked about earlier is I tell him, not every day, but I tell him frequently, as long as you're working hard and you're doing everything possible to be the best that you can be,
we're proud of you.
That's a college player, amazing. If you end up being a pro, that's that's another amazing achievement. But it's on you. Like it's on you to know what that is and how much you have to work to get that. Not my worry for him. My worry for a lot of the young and the youth athletes is that they mix the results with their sense of being, and who they are. And again, going back to the fact that tennis is very difficult. It's an individual sport. One person's winning each week. You have to separate who you are from your results. And that's something that I try to get through to my son, that no matter if you don't win a match all year, you're still a great person, and you still are treating people with respect, and you're still, the individual that, we hope that, we've raised to make good choices. But it's a hard thing, I think.
It's a hard thing. It really is.
For older people. It's tough because
Yeah.
you get wrapped into, oh shoot, gosh, I lost again. I'm terrible. Like, oh, how awful is this? So, that's something that I hope parents can see, and back to my dad, find that balance of supporting and just really encouraging the person side of it, not just the athlete side of it.
It's so important to protect their self-esteem. I remember back in the day, Dr. Lair used to talk a lot about that, is making sure that your identity as a person isn't synonymous with whether you win or lose.
Exactly.
So that's great. Thank you so much for making the time today. I've known you for a long time, but I learned a ton today about your introduction to the game and your journey. And I think we all learned some great tips in parenting and coaching. So thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
Great. Thanks, Martin. Thanks for having me. That was a lot of fun.
Our final speaker knows success on and off the court. After 14 years on tour, Paul Annacone went on to coach Pete Sampras and Roger Federer, two names you might recognize. He is currently coaching American star Taylor Fritz. Paul has held a variety of leading roles as coach and administrator in our sport. If that is not enough, you also will recognize him as one of the leading voices on Tennis Channel. Let's talk about our competition pathway and the opportunities that lie within. Here is Paul Annacone.
We're here with Paul Annacone today, and Paul and I have known each other for quite a while and haven't seen each other in a while. So Paul, first of all, welcome. Great to see you. And second of all, I want to share a few questions with you, and hopefully you'll give some answers that can help us with this conference. We've got this Play into Competition conference that we're working on. So the first question is, let me ask you a little bit about your playing background. You grew up in New York and played and trained there, and then you also spent some time at the Bollettieri Tennis Academy. Can you give a little bit of background on what might be the same or different back then versus now, what you see in junior tennis?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Paul. I know you guys are juggling a lot to get some stuff done, and I really appreciate the call and the flexibility. It has been too many years between you and I getting together, so Zoom is better than nothing, as we've seen in the last 24 to 36 months, right? So it's a new world, and the downside to that is I actually have to figure out how to use technology. So hopefully before I am worm food, that will happen. But in the interim, we'll kick it off and get rolling. For me, it's been an interesting kind of evolution to participate in, and also to go through kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of my matriculation as a player all the way through to where I am today, coaching and as a commentator, because I've seen, as you have, so many different ebbs and flows to what's happened. And I still think that there are a lot of commonalities. I think that in terms of development, I was fortunate enough to spend my developmental years kind of 13 and a half to 17 and a half at the Nick Bollettieri Tennis Academy before it became the huge machine that it is now. And I think there were a lot of life lessons and tennis lessons that I learned down there in terms of competition, responsibility, accountability, and just self-growth on and off the court. And I think all those things are still paramount. And, as I read through the guide that you guys sent, the playbook, I saw a lot of things that really resonated with me about clarity in terms of trying to get kids and parents and families to understand the different pathways. I think back when I played, it was more simple. And I think that that was both good and bad. Things in life tend to be more complex these days, but the commonalities to me are still the same: getting kids and people together as often as possible to train and compete, giving them clear ideas about pathways and different levels of pathways to go through depending on what your goals are. And the clarity and the options in the playbook are a really good handbook for people to look and see that there's not one way. There are multiple ways, but there are commonalities. And at Bollettieri's, we learned those commonalities and we learned the keys to them, which was competition, which was giving everything you had every time you played, respecting the people that you played, looking at guidelines and boundaries. And most of all, I think trying to have a good time while you're doing it, but also understanding that all that really matters is the maximum effort that you put out, and not necessarily whether or not you're winning and losing. And I think that's one of the challenges that we're facing today as we see the numbers drop. I think people are starting to get discouraged and put the rackets down. And I think that that's a little bit of a liability of an individual sport, because it all falls on you. And as a young child, if you lose too much, it's pretty discouraging. But if you're a young child and you lose as often, but are on a team, you have more people to absorb that pain with. And I think that that helps. So while the reward is better, the risk is also at a higher height as well. And I think by education and understanding different pathways and realizing that there's a lot of different ways, there's not a way, we can learn to help create a higher retention level and just higher opportunity for players. So I think that's what's changed the most, Paul. I think now it's more complex. I think we're competing in a different world with social media, so kids are distracted, the competition from the other sports, perhaps even the fact that some of the studies that I've read, people and kids in general are a little bit more sedentary than they used to be. I know I can get glued to my computer far too often for too long, and I'm sure the youth of America, since I've got 3 children, I see it as well. That's a challenge. But that's kind of it in a nutshell. The Bollettieri experience for me was terrific. I had a strong upbringing at home. My parents were both educators, which kind of gave me the foundation of life and not just tennis. And then I went down to Bollettieri's, and then I came back, graduated at my high school in East Hampton, New York, and spent 3 years at University of Tennessee, and was fortunate enough to play 10 years on the pro tour as a player. And then I've been bouncing around in the tennis industry since, and even got to spend some time with you, which was pretty fortunate.
Tell me a little bit more about your experience playing singles and doubles. I don't know if everybody plays singles and doubles anymore nowadays, at least on the pro tour. You did, and quite successful. Obviously, you got to number 12 in the world in singles. You won the Australian Open in doubles. How did that balance, and did that help your game? And what do you think kids nowadays should do? Should they focus on just playing singles or just doubles, or just on tennis and no other sports? Or do you think multiple sports are a good idea for young kids?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in the multiple sport pathway. I really believe developmentally for kids, I would encourage all parents to have kids play multiple sports. I think team sports are really important for kids when they're younger to understand accountability, responsibility to other people than yourself, to see that other things exist other than your schedule, your practice schedule, your tournament schedule, when you eat. In tennis, we as children learn me, my, me. It's all about myself. And I think the team aspect, when you're younger, can help that in terms of life skills and just evolution. But also, like I said, in terms of the winning and losing, I think it's important to give children a little bit of a buffer, so that it's not all on their shoulders when they're young. These are just some of the mental components that I see that I think are really valuable. In terms of the physical components, just the different skill sets. I played soccer briefly as a child. I played a lot of basketball. I played a little bit of baseball. So all the different movements, the hand-eye coordination, the different muscle groups that are used, all those different physical skill sets combined with the other components of the mental and emotional things that are different between team and individual sport, I think are really important for children to at least start to learn before they branch out individually. Because look, if they're going to focus in on any sport or any endeavor, at some point you start to specialize. but initially I like the idea of doing multiple things. As far as doubles is concerned, I think it was paramount in my growth as a player. You learn different skills in doubles. Again, you learn part of that team camaraderie thing, being responsible and accountable to your partner. But in terms of tennis specific things, Paul, I think it's really important for young people to learn how to play doubles and why, because it works on different skill sets in tennis. Even though doubles is very different today, you do volley, you do serve, you do come in more, you return differently to targets. There's movement aspects. There's just court geometry and what I call tennis IQ that's involved and that evolves as you play as a doubles player too. So I would encourage all kids to play doubles, all kids to play doubles all through the juniors and even through hopefully college. And then when you get to the pros, you figure out what and if you can do and how you want to try to make your living.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think now to the current players, some of those players that we see at the very top have actually played multiple sports and quite well. Nadal, Djokovic were good soccer players. Nadal in particular is known for that, but Djokovic is quite a good soccer player as well. Djokovic was a good skier. Federer skied. And now you see Jannik Sinner was a fantastic skier in the juniors, and he's now the youngest player in the top 20 in the world. So it's nice to see that there's that crossover. I think Ashley Barty is another good example who even took a hiatus from tennis and went into cricket and then came back to tennis even more successfully. So it's interesting to see that balance. So thanks for sharing that. Shifting to the coaching realm, and you've coached so many great players over the years, and been fortunate enough to be around Tim Henman and Andy Murray, and of course Roger Federer and Pete Sampras as well. Can you tell me some of the commonalities maybe that you've seen with those players that and maybe differences as well that you might point out and in having to coach them?
Yeah, I think that's so one of the things as a kind of I consider myself the quintessential student. You know, I just think no matter what you do, you always have to be willing to learn and always have to have your antenna up, because particularly in tennis, I really don't think there's a way to do things. And one of the things that I've seen in tennis as an individual sport, if you want to be successful and impactful as a coach, because it's an individual sport, you kind of have to find different ways to deliver your messaging. You know, different personalities hear it different ways. They absorb and learn differently from one person to the next. That's what I've seen through all of my players. And I think in team sports, and you know this probably better than I do, Paul, is that a lot of teams conform to the coach's philosophy. There is a philosophy and there's a strategy that's given in an umbrella fashion out to the team. And so the team kind of adapts to the coach. And I think a tennis coach, or I would probably venture to guess that a golf coach or any other individual sport has to adapt. I know in particular, let's say Pete Sampras was very different than Roger Federer. You know, Pete liked clear, concise, simplistic messages. You wanted to get your message across very quickly. You wanted it to be more directive, less inquisitive. He'd ask one question, want 2 or 3 themes about why they work, how they work, and boom, let them go. Roger, you know, when we started together, we'd spend a lot of times in a hotel room with snacks going through videos, and he would bounce ideas off me. I would bounce ideas off him. He was very inquisitive, liked to talk and evolve through the process to learn. Tim Henman was the same way. Tim really was very interested in not only what worked, but why it worked, and then how it plugged into his game. Pete was much more simplistic and directed. He just wanted kind of facts, why it works for him, and then let him go do it. You know, now I'm spending some time with Taylor Fritz, 23, 24-year-old American. David Nankin at the USTA has done an amazing job helping him. And Taylor is someone that's really opinionated. So he's very strong opinions about what he should do. So there's a lot more debate, perhaps even more debate than I had with the great, the all-time greats that I mentioned, which is really interesting. And so for Taylor, the balance is trying to get him to buy into a philosophy and get him to understand why. So these are just a couple of different skills that I've had to adapt to try to figure out how to be successful as a coach. And for me, that's one of the reasons why I love it so much, is that you have to figure things out. And there isn't a set way, right? And I think, Paul, you and I talked about this years ago when we went through some of the coaching education and the coaching development. There's many different kinds of coaches as well. I don't consider myself a great technical coach. I think that there's a lot of great technical coaches, from the early developmental stages, let's say 8, 9 years old through 14 or 15 to get the foundation. That's about shot production. That's the technique of hitting the ball. That's understanding biomechanically what has to happen so that you're successful. That's very different than what I do. I use little small themes to try to tweak some things during the off season here and there, but mine's more about strategy. Mine's more about the mental part, scheduling, understand why your game can hold up. So I think the whole spectrum of coaching and teaching, it could be, a 3-day seminar in and of itself. We used to talk about this often with Nick Saviano back in the day about, Nick had a really clear vision about how you develop as a teacher and a coach and the different components that you need to go through the different stages. And I think it's important for coaches to realize where their strengths and where their weaknesses are. And I know where mine are, and I try to listen to all the different areas so I can figure out different ways to be successful. So that's a big kind of mishigash of a lot of different things. But I think some interesting topics, especially when it comes to the coaching development and the different stages that you're coaching and teaching at.
Yeah. When you say different stages, you would separate that from specific age, potentially. It's more important to look at the stage of their development than their actual age.
Yeah, I think they're tied in, right? Usually you're going to have the most advanced players as they're older. When they're younger, at the early stages of development, learning technique, that tends to be when they're younger. But look, during the off season, with Taylor Fritz, even in December, last December, we tweaked a few different things technically. You're not going to do that 2 days before the US Open, but in December, when you have 3 weeks, you can talk about grips, you can talk about footwork, you can talk about, the biomechanics and the rhythm of your serve. There's a lot of things that you do, but it has to be really time sensitive the more advanced you get. Whereas when you're younger, I think it's much more process oriented and much less result oriented. You don't have to be so fearful of results. And that's why it's important at the early stages of kids competing that the encouragement is about just playing. It's not about winning and losing. It's about playing and having a good time at it and playing enough so that whether you win or lose, it doesn't feel like the end of the world if you've lost, and it doesn't feel like you just cured cancer if you won. So there's that perspective to keep in as well. But you're spot on. It's a lot of it's mostly age related.
Okay. Yeah, and you mentioned Taylor Fritz. First of all, congratulations on he's gotten to the semifinals of Indian Wells. Great result. I know you'll continue to work with him, with David Denkin as well, I assume. And how do you work as a team with multiple coaches? I assume, thinking back, you worked with Roger Federer. He's always had a coach alongside him from Switzerland or over the years he did. Probably the other players you've worked with as well. Andy Murray had people around him with the LTA, and others as well. I don't know if Pete did or Tim Henman, but everybody's had sort of a multiple coaches, and how do you deal with that environment?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. To me, at this stage in my life, it's actually one of the biggest blessings for me. I love working with the group. When I was younger and I coached Pete, it was really just me and Pete and his physio. And then during the strength and conditioning stuff earlier in his career with Pat Etcheberry. But I was the tennis person. And then with Roger, there was a group. Tim Henman was the first one I coached after Pete, and Tim, it was just Tim and I as well. So I've kind of evolved through that. And I think some of it, Paul, the reason why it's been helpful to me is due to the institutionalized tennis component of my experience. And by institutionalized, I don't mean put me in an institution. I mean, by even though when I was done with the USTA and the LTA in Tennis Australia, maybe I was ready for an institution, I'm not sure. But the institutionalized were the federations. You know, you're dealing with groups of people, right? You're dealing with a large player development program, a player development team, different parents, different groups of S&C. And so for me, I love that. I learned a ton with all the federations about how best to understand, manage, and streamline things. And I think now, as you know, at this stage, I love it. You know, David Nankin has been with Taylor for 2 more years than I have, knows him unbelievably well. He's one of the best coaches in the business. I think he could do anything in the coaching world at any level. I think he's amazing. And also with Taylor, we also work with Gina Ball. She works for the USDA. She does the strength and conditioning. She has been amazing. You know, she's been incredible dealing with Taylor, but she deals with all different groups of players. And then Wolfgang Oswald is Taylor's physio, travels on the road with them. He also helps Riley Opelka. So it's kind of a big jigsaw puzzle. And the biggest commonality, I think, between things as a team is there should be collaboration, cooperation, conversation. And then the challenge, though, is getting all the facts together and then giving the player a streamlined message. And that's where it can get complicated. If David's telling Taylor a lot different things than I'm telling Taylor, there's a lot of confusion and instability and insecurity and indecision that can come into play. So I think a unified message is important. I also think a diversified voice is important. So David will deliver something very differently than I would deliver it. Severin Luthi was very different with Roger than I was, but the message was the same. So I think that can be a big asset for the player. And for me, like I said, I consider myself a never-ending student. So I love being around these other people to hear their thoughts and ideas, and also their experiences that have both been successful and have fallen short of the success that they wanted. And I think by sharing those experiences, we all become better and hopefully can kind of avoid some of the potholes that the player may come up against in the coming days of development.
Yeah. So in light of that, I was thinking about you've now sort of translated your knowledge also to the Tennis Channel and doing a lot of work for them. Have you learned anything from that experience that has helped you, we think? Or we all know what you add to Tennis Channel helps everybody else, but does it work the other way as well?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we spend a lot of time sitting around the green room preparing and kicking around ideas and what's been successful and looking at players' schedules and why they've been, why they've gone through periods of success, why they've gone through periods of challenge. You go through all the statistical analysis to see how it matches up with the why of what we've seen on the court. And then when you watch the matches, for me, look, I've always been a huge fan of watching people try to problem solve under pressure. I mean, I just think that is life's biggest anecdote, whether you're a tennis player, a school teacher, a psychologist, whatever, you work in a donut shop, doesn't matter. You have to figure out how to manage things under pressure. That's one of the reasons why I had such a fond attachment to tennis as a young player, is because you're doing this and it's only about you on the court. It's like, how do you figure out what to do in these pressure-packed moments? And then you go through different scales, right? You do it at local junior tournaments, and then you go bigger tournaments, and then high school tennis and college tennis, and then the pro ranks, and then you find yourself at center court at Wimbledon, and then trying to solve problems there. So for me, I'm really, really attached and interested in watching that. So at Tennis Channel, I get to watch it unfold. I get to sit there and watch it unfold every single day. Don't tell anyone, but I think it's crazy that they pay me to get to watch people do this, because I love it. But I think it's amazing to watch how different personalities adjust and adapt in that environment. And so my job is to sit there and watch it
and then hopefully give the viewer some insight as to why that's happening. So they don't just go, oh, he missed his backhand, or oh, she just hit an ace. But why did that happen? What are they thinking about at 4-all in the third set? Why do the targets become smaller? How come all of a sudden your arm feels like it weighs 75 pounds when you try to serve out a match? You know, to let them in on those different components so that they can put a why behind the what.
Right. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. If you wanted to give parents and coaches like 1 or 2 nuggets of what they should know getting their kid into the game, should they play tennis or another sport, or and if they start entering the tennis world, what do parents need to know? Because we get this question all the time from parents. You know, my kid is getting pretty good in the junior ranks in my little town here. Should we travel all over the place, or should we stay closer to home, or what do we do as a parent? Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, look, I think the most important thing comes not from tennis, but from parenting, right? And I think it's all about making sure, you know, your child's having a good time, and making sure that they can deal with the adversity of winning and losing. To me, that's the first thing. And it's all about encouragement and evolution, not about, I don't care if you're ranked 2 in the 12s or 78 in the 12s. I don't care if your UTR is 6.2 or 16.2. For me as a parent, I really don't care. The first thing that should be the driver is how much fun is my child having with this challenge? And can they balance the fun and disappointment? And it's up to me as a parent to help them have, you know, at least a modicum of understanding of those things so that they can deal with that stuff. And if they're dealing with that well, and you're watching them go through this evolution, the most important thing after that to me is making sure you have good voices around you, making sure you do have people that understand the tennis landscape around you. And that landscape changes as you get older. But when they're young, it's really important to have those good developmental coaches. But it all has to be driven by the fun and the comprehension of the environment of the child. And you know, people, unfortunately, in my opinion, they go to all-time greats too often. All-time greats are the exception. They're not the rule. Just because Richard Williams did what he did with Venus and Serena, that's not what you're supposed to do. Just because Pete did what he did based on what his dad wanted him to do, that's not what you're supposed to do. Based on what Andres did, that's not necessarily what you're supposed to do. So sometimes they look at these tremendous legends and these aberrations, and they go, that's what I want my child to do. I can tell you how many people have come up to me and said, you know, I want my kid to serve like Pete Sampras. And they're like, good luck, you know? And I want my kid to understand how to hit a running forehand like Roger Federer. Like, yeah, me too, but that doesn't happen. But the trick is, what got them to the state where they could actually do that? It's the skills and the habits that allowed those freakish talents to blossom. Those are the traits you want to take as a parent and as a coach, not what they did, but how they got to that juncture. And, you know, Pete's laser focus to me was one of the most amazing things I've ever been around. And that was his ability. That was the ability that allowed him to inevitably trust in the most pressure-packed situation. He failed plenty of times, but he believed it. Roger's ability to have this youthful exuberance and joy and love for tennis after so many years is something I've never seen before in my life. But that's allowed him to be successful until 39 years of age. So yeah, you have to take these things into the equation and not just what you see. And that's about having good people around you. And that's about having an understanding of the evolution of the process that's taking place. But the parent, going back to your original question, Paul, it all has to be driven to me by the understanding of what your child's going through and making sure there's a nice balance between dealing with adversity, success, failure, and enjoying the processes that are surrounded by that to allow it to keep going. And then once the child really starts to get engaged, then it's getting the right tennis people to help you manage the situation. And also as a parent, I learned this the hard way too. You have to know what you don't know. You know, my son, Nicholas, got very into basketball. I backed up. I loved his jump shot. I loved watching his games, but his high school coach played for the New York Knicks back in the day. You tell him what to do. I'll sit here and cheer. You know, you have to understand what you know and what you don't know. And what you don't know, you have good people around to help guide.
Yeah. All right, I have one final question for you. We've developed this USTA junior playbook. And I know you've taken a look at that, and we would like to actually share this with all the people that attend this conference. Just wanted to know what your view on the playbook. Oh, you actually have it. Thank you for sharing that.
That was a very subtle hint. That I was doing a little advertising for you there, Paul.
Thank you for being that subtle. Yes, I appreciate it.
No, look, I read through it twice. I read through it a few days ago at Indian Wells, and then I read through it again last night. And I think it's really interesting. And some of the things that people need to look at is the balance of the quantitative versus qualitative interviews. So the fact that you're taking stuff that's real measurable and also taking opinions and putting it together to come up with some of these formulas. So for me, I think that that's really important because you can't take either end of the spectrum in isolation. And the thing that I love is one of the key themes that I found in here that just resonated with me in the research finding, the last thing that says a team competition pathway for all skill levels. And so that's one of the findings, was that how important it is to be around a team. And this talks about some of the developmental processes through team competitions, through individual competitions, and how important the balance is of both. That goes back to some of the stuff we talked about originally. As a development for a young player, it is important to be part of the team. So I would encourage all the folks to get the kids involved in team tennis components as well. Just understanding that there are different levels and there's different pathways to those different levels. And to me, what I liked is the explanation of all of them, because you and I have talked about this, Paul. We want a simplistic formula so we don't lose families and players because of complexity. Parents want it easy. Kids go to school all day and they go to baseball practice after school. You know, kids go to school all day and they go to basketball practice. There's not a lot of organizational detail to deal with. In tennis, with all due respect to the sport that I love for a lifetime, it's very easy to get washed up in the minutia. I mean, this past year, I've gotten involved with Southern Cal Tennis Association, which I've loved, and done a bunch of work with young players. And initially, when they were running through all the different structures, and I had to go online to find the different tournaments and results and what they meant, it was confusing. And I've been in tennis my whole life. It was pretty confusing. So I could see how awesome it could be for parents to get in this environment and go, wow, this is too big. And I think this is where the playbook can really help. You know, give the people a simplistic 15-page graphic of here's what you need to know. And then here are the contacts if you have questions. That's really good. So I think this is a really integral part of getting the retention levels and keeping the retention levels where we want them to be so that our wonderful sport keeps growing.
Well, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Great talking to you again. And thank you so much for all your insights. I think this will help our audience very much, and really appreciate you being part of this Play Into Competition conference. So with that, we'll end this interview, but thank you very much for your time.
Thanks you guys for your patience. I know it was a lot to juggle to squeeze me in, but I do appreciate it. And Paul, I got to thank you for not giving me a hard time. After all these years we've known each other, you didn't bust my chops at all. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. I'll wait till we finish.
Wow, 3 days have flown by. We want to thank you for being part of our Play Into Competition conference. And of course, a sincere thanks to all of our speakers and moderators. To close things out, here is USTA Chief Executive Officer for Community Tennis, Craig Morris.
Thank you, Jenna. Wow is right. The last 3 days have been filled with insightful discussion and impactful takeaways. We thank each of you for taking the time to join the USTA's first ever Play Into Competition conference. To our speakers and moderators, thank you for lending your time over the last 3 days. The insight you shared with us from your experiences is incredibly invaluable. Please be sure to take a careful look at the USTA Junior Playbook that has been mentioned throughout the conference. This will be shared out at the conclusion of the conference, and you'll also have access to the recordings to share with your friends, families, and colleagues. On behalf of the USTA, we thank each of you for the significant role that you play in the delivery of our sport. We are committed to tennis being a true model for youth sports, with an emphasis on health and wellness. And most importantly, we will continue to work as one team to provide opportunities for our youth to fall in love with our sport and really play for a lifetime. We send our best wishes to you and your families over the upcoming holidays. Stay safe and please take care.